So I wanted to welcome you again to the second session. And each session stands on its own, I hope. So if you weren't here for the first one, I think it's going to be self-explanatory where we are. And if it isn't, then we can address it later. So it's choiceless awareness and transformation is today's session. And the first thing I want to say before I forget is that, no one is an expert on Krishnamurti, of course. And so anything that is illuminated in these sessions is really coming from you. It's something that resonates with you, and therefore it illuminates something that you already knew but didn't see. That's the way I look at it anyway. This idea, or this, shall we call it, transcendent experience of transformation, in the way I understand Krishnamurti, works in tandem with choiceless awareness. In a way, they're a team. One doesn't happen without the other. And yet choice does play a role in our lives. I mean, we all woke up this morning and we chose something to wear. We go to the market, we buy a ripe tomato usually, not a green tomato. So I didn't really speak to that so much last time, that these ordinary daily choices are normal, and there's nothing wrong with that. Choiceless awareness, though, is a different dimension of awareness, where the filter of thought is absent. That's the ideal. And then finally, my last little point before we get started is that, as you know, Krishnamurti really talked about one theme his entire life. And he talked about it from different angles. And that one theme is that every human being, we all share this in common. The ground we stand on is our conditioning. And if we can be free of our conditioning, we are transformed. And that transformation takes place within. This is not something that we can quantify from the outside. And that transformation can help change the world. He pointed out over and over again that an individual's transformation changes the consciousness of the world. And that is partly what we're going to talk about later this morning. He asks, what do we mean by transformation? Surely the cessation of all problems, cessation from conflict, confusion, and misery. If you observe, you will see that the mind is cultivating, sowing, and harvesting as a farmer cultivates, sows, and reaps. But unlike the farmer who allows the field to lie fallow during winter, the mind never allows itself to lie fallow. So he continues, there must be a tilling of the soil, using the farmer metaphor again, the upheaval, the revolution of the mind. And yet, at the same time, there must be stillness, silent perception without denial, acceptance or resignation. To comprehend the full significance of the I process, intelligent persistence is essential, not casual awareness at odd moments. There's a lot is being said in this statement, and I think we all know that when we see something about ourselves that is, you could call a tilling of the soil, we're seeing things that are hidden, It can cause upheaval. It causes a revolution, and we see it. And we see it in that light of stillness, because we're not judging it. We're not making it a problem. It's just something we see. And then he says it's something to be seen in a persistent way. Not just at the odd moment. The chief concern for a serious person is the total transformation of the human mind, not the partial. A complete revolution in the psyche, because that is the movement which can transform the outward environment. Now, sometimes I make notes for myself and I either forget to delete them or I leave them there on purpose. So just trying to unpack that statement of Kay's, unmasking ourselves to ourselves with wordless observation, radically changes us from within, and that makes it possible for the world to also change, to be transformed. Seeing this is its own action. The how, if there is one, is in the seeing. He says, one does not seem to be able to understand how extraordinarily important it is to see what one is, actually, as though one is looking at oneself in a mirror, psychologically, thereby bringing about a transformation in the very structure of oneself. When one fundamentally, deeply brings about such a transformation or mutation, then that mutation affects the whole consciousness of man. This is an absolute fact, a reality. To bring about a fundamental transformation becomes very important. If one is at all serious, if one is concerned with the world as it is, with all its appalling misery. So if I can point this in one sentence, in this sense, each individual can make a difference in the consciousness of humanity, for better or for worse. This is what Krishnamurti is saying. And this is something we all have to question and investigate for ourselves. To see what one actually is, it is vital that there be freedom. Freedom from the whole content of one's consciousness. Freedom from one's angers and brutalities, from one's vanities and arrogance, from all the things that one is caught up in. The very seeing of what one is the beginning of the transformation. This transformation is not the me becoming the greater me, but the transformation of the content of consciousness. The consciousness of the world is your consciousness. You are the world and the world is you. Now, and then he says it again in a different way. If you as a human being transform yourself, you affect the consciousness of the rest of the world. Now, once, I think it was a couple of years ago, I was giving a talk on Kay's on beauty and nature from Krishnamurti's point of view. And somewhere in that talk, I mentioned this phrase, and there was someone in the room who completely rejected this, that the consciousness of the world could not be changed simply if my consciousness is transformed. And we had quite an interesting discussion about it. And with that in my mind, I found something that I had not read in, because, there are many, many talks that have been transcribed, and I have not read every one of them. But I wanted to bring this in as a kind of clarifying point to this sense that if my consciousness can affect the world, or your consciousness can affect the world. He says, investigate whether you, as a human being who is the rest of humanity, if there is a radical mutation, you affect the whole of consciousness of mankind. I do not know if you have not noticed in America or in Russia or in some remote part of Japan, they invent something. The rest of the world picks it up. It is there. You understand? It is happening. And this continues. If one or two or a dozen or 100 bring about a fundamental freedom of conditioning, they affect the whole consciousness of humanity. And he says this is so. As Hitler affected the whole consciousness of mankind, Napoleon, your religious leader, or the other religious leaders, they have affected humanity. So can we, after stating all this, can we bring about, not through a gradual process of evolution, that is out, finished, can we bring about a mutation in our whole being, in our whole behavior, in our whole way of looking at life? It is as though we are attempting to see the clear, pure light through colored glasses, which we are unaware of wearing. To see the pure light, we must first be aware of our colored glasses. This awareness, if the urge to see the pure light is strong, helps to remove the colored glasses. It seems to me, too, that this is implying that our intention matters, which is a different thing from ambition or the me. It is simply a quiet intention to be attentive, to be aware. And Sri Aurobindo put it this way: in order to see, you have to stop being in the middle of the picture. To be aware of our self-enclosing activities is to break them down. So we're back to the very, really simple observation of myself, to be aware of my thinking and my tendency to believe what I'm thinking helps break down the conditioning that underpins my thoughts, memory, personal history, etc., etc. Since we're talking about awareness, I have scattered a couple of 3 or 4 of these moments where we can just take a pause and become aware of the breath and take a moment simply to relax the body, the mind. Because, already a lot has been presented. Maybe it's helpful just to take a moment to be quiet. And to silently observe what may be going on in my mind, or if there's some place in my body where I feel tense. Because I have offered this before, but I've found that relaxation, at least for me, is the first step to being aware. And that relaxation so often comes from simply taking a conscious breath. Now, I came upon a very interesting way that Krishnamurti presented awareness. And had I actually been aware of this before my book was published, I would have quoted from this, because it's exactly, it's so useful in trying to understand this choiceless awareness and how it can act in a transformative way on the conditioned mind. So I just gave it a name, Krishnamurti on Awareness and Transformation by Being Aware of Crows. And he was talking to a large group of people in Bombay in 1964 outside. So I'm taking you into the part of that talk that is meaningful for our discussion. So he had been talking about awareness, and he says, out of this awareness of all that has been said till now, awareness of those crows, awareness of the speaker, awareness of your reactions to the speaker, and the words he is using choicelessly, of this awareness, there is attention. You listen to crows, actually listen, give your attention, not resistance. Listen to crows and listen to the speaker simultaneously, not two different things. We all know how noisy crows can be, so it's including the crows, not excluding them when you're trying to listen to someone. So whatever the peripheral noise is, it's included, not excluded in one's awareness. And he says, and to pay complete attention to the crows and to the speaker, and to watch your own mind, how it is working, you need that attention which comes out of complete silence. Otherwise, you are merely resisting the crows and trying to listen to the speaker. So there is a division, there is a conflict, there is a pushing away, an exclusion, which is what most people do. It is only the mind that is completely aware, that is completely attentive. But actually, if you follow this way of presentation on Kay's part, one can easily see that it is a matter of including everything in a listening endeavor and watching one's response to all of that, that clears some space for silence. Because the mind isn't fighting with anything, it's including everything that's being heard. So I did a little summary here in case it's helpful. In this silent observation or choiceless awareness, attention to the crows. I'm using Krishnamurti's example, but it could be anything. Attention to the crows, attention to the speaker, whoever you are listening to, or if it's you that's speaking, attention to your own speaking, attention to the mind. How is it working while this is happening? Observing one's resistance, irritation, or whatever appears as thought. And then I've added this, simultaneously, with all that going on, giving attention to what is going on in the body, including tensions that arise. All of this happens in a flash. These are my words, listening and seeing in 4 dimensions, as it were. There's an awful lot going on. And it's happening at lightning speed. In a moment of quietly observing all of this, and according to Krishnamurti, this has an effect on the brain. It causes a mutation in the brain. Something as simple as this. He says, be aware without choice, and you will discover that a deep revolutionary change is taking place within you. And once again, just to repeat that the choice, being aware without choice, indicates there is no judgment going on. There's no commentary. There's simply the seeing and the listening. That's it. Only when there is an effortless or choiceless awareness can there be discovery and understanding, a perception of the true. Doesn't she have a beautiful face? I think so. Now, last time we tried a little experiment. You may remember I had put an image on the screen to indicate how we so instantly name things. So I wanted to see, this is simply an experiment because, of course, these are images. And yet the images that I'm going to show you happen in everyday life. Well, most of them do. And so here's the experiment. I put the image on the screen. And when you see it, you give attention to the inner response to that image, to what the mind is doing, whether it's naming it, liking or not liking, and whatever is noticed in the mind, body, or emotions. Something may come up just by seeing an image. Most often, naming is inevitable. We can't help it. It's in noticing the naming that matters, because then it may drop away. So it's just an experiment in attention into what the mind is doing or not doing. Again, an image, but also something one can come upon in the natural world. One thing Krishnamurti talked quite a bit about was trees. He loved trees. He talked about hearing the root system of trees, without naming them. But when the naming is finished, it's almost like the brain has to do it. Then the name can drop away. And the distance between me and the tree drops away. Just a moment to take another breath. All of those images, except for the tiger, are possible in our daily life. It's possible to see those things in our daily life. And of course, the question is whether or not we actually see what we see. That's what Krishnamurti was pointing to. Now, the whole point to, well, that's not quite the right way to say it. The suggestion that self-transformation matters has to do with compassion. And choiceless awareness is, as it were, the gate to both transformation and compassion. In fact, compassion and transformation and choiceless awareness are one movement. He says, where there is a change, a radical mutation in the conditioning, which means freedom from all conditioning, that freedom is love. It is not self-interest. That freedom is compassion, but compassion is not attached to any religion. It isn't because I love Jesus or Krishna or somebody that I am compassionate. Compassion is born only out of total freedom. And my note, the total freedom in a moment of seeing through the misconceptions of me. He says, where there is love, there is neither choice, nor condemnation, nor justification. It is this love that brings about transformation. So compassion or love, these two words are interchangeable. We're not talking about anything sentimental, transforms us. Choiceless awareness opens the door to the negation of self and other. There is either, in this sense, choiceless awareness, or the silent observation of what is, or there is the self-interest of me. That's the way I see it. He says, compassion is like a great rock, immovable in the midst of confusion, misery, and anxiety. Without this compassion, no new culture or society can come into being. So choiceless awareness, compassion, transformation are one movement. And the conditioning disappears in that timeless moment. Just another breath, another moment. Now, in working on this, I came upon what Krishnamurti points out as the fundamental obstacle to self-transformation or choiceless awareness or anything that indicates a silent mind. Being at ease with what is. And so I decided to put it in just a day or two ago because I think it's important. He says it is absolutely important if you want to bring about a deep transformation of the human mind, human consciousness, that one should be completely and totally free of psychological fears. Psychological fear. And this is the most important of all. Fear is what makes us accept our conditioning. And so the observation of my fears, the small ones, the medium-sized ones, the larger ones, that is going to be fundamental to inner freedom, to breaking through the wall of my own conditioning. He explains it this way. I lead a certain kind of life. I think in a certain pattern. I have certain beliefs and dogmas, and I don't want those patterns of existence to be disturbed because I have my roots in them. I don't want them to be disturbed because the disturbance produces a state of unknowing, and I dislike that. Anxiety. Change is always bringing anxiety most of the time. If I am torn away from everything I know and believe, I want to be reasonably certain of the state of things to which I am going. In a way, it's like standing on shaky ground. It's an earthquake when we really begin to notice what I'm stuck in. He says, so the brain cells have created a pattern, and those brain cells refuse to create another pattern, which may be uncertain. The movement from certainty to uncertainty is what I call fear. I think it helps such a great deal to be aware that this may be going on underneath just about everything. Because the awareness of it unveils it. Otherwise, it's hidden. He says the mind can never be free of fear as long as it is making an effort to get away from fear. all that it can do is to be aware that it is frightened and be completely passive without any choice. Sometimes the word passive is difficult, but my understanding of the usage of that word isn't that you just close up and, it's more that that one is attentive without trying to change anything, without trying to run away, just being with it. And therefore, there's no choice in it. Then you will see that the mind becomes extraordinarily quiet. And in that quietness, the problem of fear can be resolved. And I should again say that he's talking about psychological fear, not the fear of a wild tiger in the forest or anything that could present bodily harm. So I'm coming back to the insight that was you could say, the inspiration for this series of 4 sessions. Through awareness, through choiceless observation, which is possible only when in the mind there is space to observe, every form of conditioning is dissolved. In that choiceless observation of what is in a moment, And if the conditioning is dissolved, obviously there is a transformation of one's being. And that transformation of one's being would affect the world around one. And according to Krishnamurti, it affects the consciousness of the whole of humanity. And so he says this, there is hope in the individual, in you, not in a system, not in the blueprint of a planned society, not in any religious organization, but in you, the individual. And of course, this one statement of Kay's, for me, has always summed up his entire teaching, his entire reason for being. When I understand myself, I understand you, and out of that understanding comes love. That's the beauty of transformation.